You are listening to Faithless Brewing, a Magic the Gathering podcast for the Spike Road. Each week we design new decks for tournament play. We put our creations to the test and share our findings on the air. The Machine Orthodoxy continues its relentless march with more battles, more free spells, and more Phyrexian sharks. Cavedan teams up with special guest Lawson Zandi to find the most worthy contenders for Modern and Pioneer. This is part 2 of our Brewer's Guide to March of the Machine. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the Faithless Brewing podcast. I am your host, Dan Shriver, joining you from sunny Austin, Texas. And with me again for the second time in just a few weeks, it's Lawson Zandi. Lawson, welcome back.
Happy to be back. I'm in Dallas now.
I know, just up the road, a little bit north. Getting ready for next year's Hunter Burton, I assume?
Yep, 50 weeks away. Always on the road, you know?
So, Lawson, you were on the show just a couple weeks ago. You were telling us about some of your work in Modern with the Shining Shoal pitch decks. Glad to have you back because we're kicking off our preview season. New set, March of Machines. We got a ton of cards to get through, and I would love to just pick your brain about this because you've been brewing up a storm, and I just love the way that you are thinking of these bizarre card combinations. So I'm very keen to hear your take on some of the newest stuff. That's going to be the bulk of our show today, going through previews. But before we dive in, I do just want to check in with you again. So what happened with Shining Shoal? What have you been playing? What have you learned? How do you feel about all that right now?
Still a lot to learn. These days I've been on more of a red-white version of the list. Just playing more good cards. So Ragavan, Season Pyromancer, Fable, all really powerful. Getting to play Season Pyromancer and Fable lets you play as many bad cards as you would like, so you get to play Chancellor again. Tried a little bit of Chalice of the Void and Chancellor of the NX, and that's a hell of a drug. Being on the play, revealing a Chancellor, not letting them do their turn 1 play, and then playing a Chalice on 1 has been kind of nuts, but, you know, still a lot to explore there. A lot of 4/1s. You know, playing good cards, you always 3-2 Modern leagues, so nothing groundbreaking yet.
Should I be concerned that you said, I just wanted to play more good cards, and you immediately named 3 red cards in what we had previously thought of as like a mono-white pitch deck?
I'm still calling it mono-white, but yeah, it's one of those things where I think the best cards in the format right now, Ragavan is something that lets you win any match of Magic, no matter how bad of matchup it is, because if it's not handled, you can just have 7 mana on turn 4, and that's a lot of mana. Fable and Season Pyromancer let you smooth out your draws and get rid of clunky cards that are kind of situation dependent. So it's kind of hard for those cards to ever be too terrible. Their floor is like a 6 or 7 out of 10. So like it's kind of remarkable how far card design is.
You started off by saying, all right, I want to explore Shining Shoal without having to play Chancellor because it's not worth it to protect these bad white 1-drops. And now I feel like you've moved away from the Shining Shoal entirely, but you still want to keep the Chancellor to protect your red 1-drops. Like the Shining Shoal didn't make it this far in the brewing, but the Chancellor has stayed. So like, is that the true sleeper card right now?
Well, I'm still playing Shoal. The thing that I realized with Shoal is you cannot play a whole lot of the 1-drop white cards because pitching a Esper Sentinel to your Shining Shoal is not very impactful. So as long as you still have the Chancellors and the Emeria's Calls and, you know, some Solitudes, you can still justify playing, you know, a lower white count, just because, you know, those aren't the things that you're going to be pitching to your Shoal at the end of the day. It makes your Solitudes a little worse, but, I mean, that card's also really powerful. Also getting to play 8 things that make treasure tokens, you just get to cast your 7-drop white things that you have no business getting to actually play, so.
Yeah, I think enough of us have died to hard cast Archon of Cruelties these days that we're getting sick of seeing Fable on the other side of the table, even in Modern. I think you mentioned to me the other day. The other day you said you felt like Fable was the most powerful card in Modern. And I wasn't sure if you were just like on a Fable high at the time, or if you actually believe this.
I think it is way closer to being true than false. I remember when Wrenn and 6 first got printed, people were just trying to like think about how much value that single card got them. Mm-hmm. And people kind of got to the point where they thought that it was like 2.5 cards worth of value. I think Fable the Mirror Breaker is basically always at least 3 cards worth of value. The Shaman has to be dealt with. The flip side has to be dealt with. And if you're cycling one card that doesn't have any value in your hand, we've already got to 3 cards worth of value. And that is the worst case scenario. Imagine a world where the Fable comes into play, the, Goblin Shaman isn't dealt with, makes you a couple treasures, ramps you, it discards 2 cards that don't have any text right now, and then you flipped the Fable and it got to make a copy of something. Like, that version of the Fable where it went unchecked is like 7 cards worth of value. So it's like very, very swingy, and usually for a card to have such a high ceiling like that, its floor has to be really low. That's just not the way this card works. So that's why I've been really, really excited about it. I've been playing a bunch of brews with worse cards than even the Shoal list. I'm back on the Bizarre Trade Mage pile, and
oh boy,
playing Wonder with Fable has been just a good time.
Oh my gosh.
Getting to discard Wonder to Fable to now have your Goblin Shaman have flying has been insane. Also, playing Wonder in your Hollow 1 Vengevine deck, you just have a lot of creatures with a bunch of power that you just get to steal games that you don't deserve to be in. So that's been a hell of a drug. Good to be back on.
That's amazing. It's good to have you back. It's great to see you just throwing all these wild deck lists around in the Faithless Brewing Discord. Excited to see where this journey takes you. Speaking of the Discord, before we get to our preview section, just a quick reminder that if you're enjoying the podcast and would like to support what we do, you can do so by going to our Patreon page. You can find that at patreon.com/faithlessbrewing. We have several tiers. Make a pledge at any tier you like. That gets you access to our Discord, as well as other perks if you want to go higher up on the tiers. We have merch, we have playmats, we have tokens. We do have one new patron we'd like to welcome this week. That is Jeff G. Thank you very much for your support, and welcome to the Faithless family. All right, so Lawson, March of Machines, what do you think so far?
I am incredibly excited. This has been probably the most hyped for a set that I've been in a long time. I don't know if it's just because we're getting to see a bunch of cool planes and I'm a bit of a lore dork, but this has been a set that I'm very excited for. I did think at first when I kind of heard about what this set was going to be, I thought this was going to be the like pioneer thing that, really jumpstarts the power level in that format. I feel like, though, my initial reaction to that is wrong, and I'm actually way more excited about a lot of these cards in Modern than Pioneer, but I would be happy to be wrong about that, and for Pioneer to get a nice shakeup, but we'll have to see how that goes.
Intriguing. So are you more excited for individual cards right now, or is it the mechanics? So the mechanics, Morton and I talked about this on Friday. We have 4 of them. Battle, a brand new card type. Incubate, a new game object. These are tokens that you can flip into creatures of various sizes. Backup, which is kind of a ETB trigger that lends bonuses from a powerful creature to another creature for 1 turn. And then the returning mechanic, Convoke.
So I'm very excited about Battle. I'll kind of walk in order of excitement levels. Battle is super exciting for me. Convoke is sweet to have more cards with that text on it. I think that Backup is an interesting mechanic, and I think there is literally only 1 card with Incubate that I'm even interested in looking at for any reason at all. So that's kind of where I'm at with the mechanics. Just to talk about Battle for a little bit, because I know you guys did talk about it some last time. The important thing for me when it comes to Battle is you need to care about value. So, full-on aggro decks, probably not going to be interested in this. Full-on control decks, probably not going to be too interested in this. Combo decks, probably not going to be too interested in this. But if you care about being on the board, getting 2-for-1s, really grinding out your opponent, these cards are going to be super, super impactful. And it's going to mean that you need to have creatures with big, efficient stat lines on the board, which, funny enough, you guys kind of joked about it, but I don't think you guys really thought about how impactful this is for Tarmogoyf. Tarmogoyf is, not only does he get a benefit from battles being in the graveyard, but he's also the best to win a battle. Like, imagine playing a turn 2 Tarmogoyf after any amount of hand disruption or killing a creature.
Okay.
You've got a 3-4 or 4-5 Tarmogoyf on turn 2 or 3 pretty easily. That man wins battles, and nothing interacts with him in the combat step on turn 2 or 3, other than basically exactly the Domain Kavu in Modern. But, I mean, you can play both of them. Like, you can play a kind of Domain beatdown deck, and instead of having to play terrible cards like Wild Nacatl and Lightning Helix, you could throw in some sweet battles. Tribal Flames is a 1-card blow-up target battle, so there's like a lot of ways that deck specifically can kind of jump from this kind of awkward creature deck to actually some grindy kind of Jund Fest. So pretty excited about that overall.
So there's a lot in what you just said. I just want to unpack it a little bit more because I feel like Mort and I did not quite get our heads around this card type yet. I mean, it's so new. What I'm hearing you say is, okay, yes, mid-range decks that are on the battlefield with creatures, that's important. You're saying that a play pattern that we should be looking for is get a big creature down first, a Tarmogoyf, a Territorial Kavu, something of that nature, and then every battle is like super explosive because you can cast it later for the spell effect and you can immediately trigger it if you want to. You know, play your whatever that one that makes them sack a creature, they sack something, and then you just immediately flip the battle.
Exactly, yeah. I think that the battles are worse when your opponent can defend them and have, you know, a plan. I think it is like a pretty big swing if you can play the battle, get its effect, and then immediately flip it. And the most efficient way to do that will likely be just having creatures already in play that are efficient and big. So my 3 main ones that I was looking at in Modern that can do this are the Territorial Kavu, Tarmogoyf, and Death Shadow. Death Shadow is a little awkward because he does, you know, have a little bit of a restriction on how early he can come in, but I mean, those 3 cards are, you know, big stat lines, big beatdowny, and other than the Kavu, have all come from decks that are very mid-rangey. You know, there are Jund Shadow lists from Magic's history that are pretty excited about the idea of getting on the board, messing with your opponent's threats. So those are all homes that I would be looking at initially.
Scion of Draco, I think we could put in there. I mean, you mentioned the Territorial, you mentioned the Kavu already, but the Scion has seen play in some non-zoo decks. Fairly versatile card, very hard to block, and a lot of battles we've seen only cost 2 mana and they only take 4 damage to flip them. So one way in which we may be underrating a battle, and I'm still not sure if this is true, but you only have to pay a few mana for the battle, and then you always have the option of unlocking all this extra value. So even though we may be like telling ourselves how we don't want to spend the time attacking it, the fact is the total amount of value on the cardboard is huge for a very small mana cost, right? It costs you time, it costs you attacking steps, almost like a Saga that flips into a creature, or like a creature on suspend, where, you know, the upfront mana cost was not much, and you get a lot for that mana, as long as you're willing to wait for it or work for it.
Yeah, so, you know, just to jump into a card to kind of use as an example, and I don't believe you guys talked about this one last week. I think it came out literally the day after y'all posted, but Invasion of Regatha. It's red and 2 for a battle with 5 defense. Whenever it enters the battlefield, it does 4 damage to another battle or opponent and 1 damage to up to 1 target creature. And then whenever you defeat the battle, you get a 4/4 human monk with prowess. If a non-creature source you control would deal damage to a creature, battle, or opponent, it deals that much damage plus 2. This, I think, is a perfect way of kind of measuring the cost of fighting one of these battles, because you guys did bring up last week that, you know, punching the battle is not free, That is damage that you could be doing to your opponent's face. The invasion, by costing 3 mana and automatically dealing 4 to your opponent, if we're not interested in blowing up this battle, that's fine. We've already dealt 4 damage to the opponent. If we are interested in getting the invasion of Regatha to flip, though, we're not really paying that much because it's done 4, we're hitting it for 5, we're kind of letting our opponent gain 1 life to get this backside. But this backside is very, very impactful for burn strategies, so it kind of compensates you once you've done the work. So, there is definitely a cost to these things, but I think that overall, most of them, unless you are a pure aggro deck, you are pretty excited about flipping.
A whole card type of Fable of the Mirror Breakers, perhaps. Wildly underrated cards, is that what I'm hearing? Or just widely versatile and useful cards?
I think they are very hard to understand. I will say, I think the ones that have 4 defense are infinitely easier to flip than the ones with 5.
I agree.
The difference in 4 and 5 is not 1 in this case, but probably like 2 or 3, because you're going to have multiple creatures attack it. You're going to have to use multiple effects on it, so you're not actually using 4 damage, possibly, to get it flipped over, but you're going to be converting a larger amount. So, but that's all stuff we're going to have to learn from actually playing with these things.
Yeah, very little can deal 5 to any target. It's basically just Shrapnel Blast, Tribal Flames, and then the new card, Render Inert, which is specifically for killing battles.
And unplayable. No.
Ouch. Okay. Breaking my heart already. Well, we're going to see a lot more battles in today's show, so let's just jump into the cards. Mord and I started at the bottom of the curve and worked our way up, and we didn't get that far. We only made it as far as, I think, Wrenn and Realmbreaker. We'll start again at the bottom because we have some new cheap ones that I'm very excited about, but we'll see if Lawson and I can get to some of the more expensive stuff today. But I'm going to start off small. Let's talk about the Omen Hawker. This is a blue 1-drop, single blue mana, Cephalid Advisor, 1/1 creature. It has the ability tap, add, colorless, and blue. So that's 2 mana total, 1 is colorless, 1 is blue. Spend this mana only to activate abilities. Activate abilities. So these are things that have a colon in the card text.
Sell me. I need to know, why are we excited about the most constrained mana dork of all time? I'm listening.
Are you not a Thran Turban fan, Lawson? It's 2 mana every turn. This is like a soul ring on a blue creature. What's not to love? This is probably my favorite card, at least in my top 5 favorite cards. All my favorite cards are blue in this set, and they're all cheap little ticky-tacky things like this. But here's a few sequences you might be interested in. Turn 1, Omen Hawker. Turn 2, Reckoner Bankbuster. What format are we in? Are we in Standard? Are we in Pioneer? Are we in Modern? I'm not sure. But that's an amazing sequence. And I'm saying this having spent a lot of time trying to make Tezzeret, Betrayer of Flesh, use that static text, right? The static is you get a free activation every turn of an artifact. And part of the issue with all those decks is that the more you lean into that effect, the more you're like, Tezzeret better come up fast, and better be good, otherwise I'm not going to have time to activate all these random abilities. Omen Hawker gives you a bunch of access to that effect, so we can kind of answer the question, will I actually have access to the mana for this Reckoner Bankbuster line, or this Incubator line, for example? And I think now you can with the Hawker. So that's one option. Option 2, if you don't like Tezzeret, play Omen Hawker turn 1, turn 2, cycle a Shark Typhoon. That's a 2/2 shark. You drew a card, and it's just going to get better the later in the game you go. You can look into Modern, right? You can use Omen Hawker to activate your Urza Sagas. It activates your Elvish Reclaimers. It activates your Fiend Artisans, which finds the Elvish Reclaimer, which finds the Saga, right? It pays for the Nykthos activation. It's a cheap blue creature for Convoke. It works with Unctus, right? It's a tapper for that. David is interested in maybe comboing with Freed from the Real. Freed from the Real allows you to go infinites as long as you have a creature that taps for a blue plus something else. That's exactly what Omen Hawker does. Now you'll only be able to spend the colorless mana on something like Walking Ballista Pumps, for example. But that's part of the problem to solve. There's a ton of stuff that Omen Hawker does. It supports a lot of strategies that like haven't had the pieces yet. Like I actually was going very deep on Training Grounds when I first saw this, because like Training Grounds works best with things that activate for 2 or 3 mana total, and you just need more access to that effect more quickly. Biomancer's Familiar is not it, but maybe Omen Hawker is.
All right, I am more interested now.
I feel like I'm pouring my heart and soul out for you.
I am more interested. I've pulled it out of the trash can. I will say I do like the fact that it plays well with swords as well. 2 mana for activation cost does let you equip all of the Sword of X and Y's. So I will say I am a little hesitant. If this thing was colorless, I would be really excited about it. Being able to play it and activate Urza Saga on turn 2 would be super, super sweet. I am just a little worried, especially in the older formats, having a 1-mana 1/1. I have tried to play Llanowar Elves many times in these Fury formats, and it goes as well as you think it would. So I'm a little worried about it outside of Pioneer. I do like the Bank Buster combination. A little worried about playing a kind of clunky card in the Bank Buster decks. Usually those decks are just a pile of, these are the cards that are good in these colors. But there's more to this card than clunky 1-drop, because it is a Soul Ring-esque thing if, we don't have our glasses on. So it is, it's got something. I'll say that.
All right. I'm going to keep pitching you on it tomorrow, maybe. You haven't heard the last of this card for sure. But we must move on to another blue 1-drop that I'm very excited about. This one plays great with the Omen Seeker, Lawson. It's the Captive Weird. Captive Weird, single blue creature weird. It's a 1/3 defender. You can transform it using this new Phyrexian activation. So 3 generic and 1 red Phyrexian mana allows you to transform the Captive Weird at sorcery speed. When you do, it becomes the 3/3 Compleated Conjurer, a Phyrexian weird. When this creature transforms into Compleated Conjurer, exile the top card of your library, and you have until the end of your next turn to play that card. So even if you're spending all your mana to tap out to flip the Captive Weird into the Compleated Conjurer, you still get your next turn to play the land or play whatever it was. This card by itself is not going to do it, but I will just point out it works great with the Omen Seeker. It works great with Training Grounds, or if you prefer Zerta the Dawnwaker or Biomancer's Familiar, depending on what format you're in. You will only have to pay 1 mana to flip this and 2 life, so it becomes basically a 2 mana total 3/3 that draws a card.
I'm definitely more in on this card than the Omen Hawker. I do think this card is also interesting as just kind of an efficient early game thing to put on the board, as it 1/3 with Defender is kind of annoying to get through for the first couple of turns, and then once it flips, it's both getting you some card advantage and now a 3/3. This thing I could see in a blue-red deck just being a kind of efficient way to get on the board early, keep our card advantage rolling. I don't know what the other 56 cards look like in the deck, but this one I am a little more excited about for Pioneer.
Yeah, it's a great way to start your Convoke mana base, if we can call it that. Lead on some 1-drop, like the Captive Weird. Maybe your next card is like a Baral Chief of Compliance, and then you're trying to Convoke out some stuff really cheaply. Actually, we're going to see some Convoke stuff in just a minute here.
Absolutely, and I think that's a good point to make, and kind of talk about Convoke just for a second. The secret that I have found for making Convoke playable in formats past is your creatures are better at convoking the worse they are at pointing removal spells at. So that heuristic basically just means you can't play creatures that are just the most powerful, efficient things on rate, because those are the things that are already getting the removal spells pointed at them. They're getting blown up, and you're not getting to really get their value from the Convoke side of things. So I would definitely suggest, if you are planning on Convoking, having some creatures that are a little annoying to target 1-for-1 removal at.
Annoying because they give you some extra value, or annoying because your opponent just feels embarrassed to remove them, right? It's still a 1-for-1 to kill the Captive Weird, but they're going to feel bad. They're going to feel bad that they spent their Fatal Push on a Captive Weird. The next card here, Surge of Salvation, to me looks exciting for Modern. Curious to hear your take on it, Lawson. So tell us about the Surge.
I would love to. I am also very excited about this card. 1 white mana instant. You and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn. Prevent all damage that black and or red sources would deal to creatures you control this turn. Thank you so much for letting me talk about the weird white protection spell. I feel like I've played a lot of them recently. This card, I think, is absolutely insane. So a couple important things to note about this. One, it's all of the damage sources that black and red things would deal this turn. So that's not just removal spells, that's not just combat, it's going to be both of them. So this is a kind of a way to protect against fury and anger of the gods and just straight up combat damage. Like you can block their fury with your centaur courser and then just be like, all right, Surge of Salvation, my guys don't take damage, kill your thing. So that's pretty exciting. And then the other thing to note about this, it says you and permanents you control gain hexproof. Yes. It does not reference the color of the thing. So this is also a protection spell against Force of Vigor. It's a protection spell against, other destroy effects that aren't in black or red that target. So this is something that I think that all of the Hammer Time decks are going to be incredibly excited about. This is a card that I think is really, really phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, that Force of Vigor protection is absolutely huge. That alone feels like it has the potential to like shift things in the modern meta. Like it's going to be an incremental shift, but making Force of Vigor worse, making Fury worse. This is actually one of the best cards to stop the grief scam if you're on the play. Like this just embarrasses a turn 1 grief because you just play it and suddenly they can't even target you. So if they already cast the grief, they've already 2-for-1 themselves. They won't get to look at your hand. That Feign Death they were going to play won't get them a card either. So it's kind of like a main deckable Veil of Summer, if I can go that far. Although I don't know if it's going to see main deck play. But if this comes to pass, like this is a devastating card against Rakdos Scam, devastating against Force of Vigor.
And it's got the side benefit of like Veil of Summer already does let you stop that game interaction from the scam deck, but it's so much worse to draw later in the game because, if they've got a 4/3 grief in play and they're just beating you down with it, they're beating you down with it. And now you've drawn this card that literally doesn't have any text. If you draw Surge of Salvation later on, perfect. Chump block with your Stoneforge Mystic and your Thalia, and then cast Surge of Salvation, and now my guys live. And, even if you keep your guy alive with another Undying effect, I now have Hexproof, so you can't get a card out of me this time. So this card I'm very, very excited about.
Would it be fair to call this the best modern card we've seen so far from the set?
No, actually. I think you guys talked about Invasion of Tarkir last week. I think that is probably the best one so far.
Oh, wow.
I believe.
Really?
Is Tarkir the one that lets you discard lands? Whichever one that one is. That one is super sweet, but...
No, we haven't gone to that one yet, actually.
Oh, okay. We'll talk about that one later then, because I'm very excited about that one.
Tarkir is the 2-mana shock that if you deal 5 to it, you get the dragon that shocks things.
Oh, no thank you.
Okay. All right, next up, a couple of Convoke spells. I'll just read them together because they're very similar cards. One is black, one is blue. Pile on, 3 and a black instant with Convoke. Destroy target creature or planeswalker and surveil 2. So it's a Hero's Downfall variant, it's instant speed, and it has Convoke, and it gets you this bonus surveil 2. For your consideration, also, I will mention Temporal Cleansing, 3 and a blue, sorcery with Convoke. The owner of target non-land permanent puts it into their library, second from the top or on the bottom. So the controller will get the choice. They either bury it a little bit or they just put it away. Obviously, the blue version is going to be clunkier than the black one. It's a common versus a rare, but for blue players, for Crabvine players, we're very excited about the Temporal Cleansing. I'll just throw that out there right now. But they're very similar cards in how they're costed and constructed. So walk me through this, Lawson, like, as a Convoke expert, how would you assess these cards?
I love that new title. So Pylon is one that I am pretty excited about for Pioneer and Standard. My general heuristic a lot of times for Convoke cards is if you need it to cost 2 less from the Convoke, you're asking a little bit too much from the card, I think. Pylon, if I'm having to spend black and 2 for this, I'm plenty happy with that. So that means that it's got a lot of ability to be much better than that. I am imagining, getting to play a 2-drop and then pile on and being very happy with that. And that's all the boxes I need to check to make this card playable. Late game, you're going to get into a board stall, and it, very likely for you to get to play a 4-drop and then play pile on for 1 mana. Like that's something that is like very game breaking. So very excited about that.
Is it the Surveil 2 that makes you okay with paying 3 for this? Or is it just like in a deck that wants a removal spell, I don't really care how much it costs, as long as it gets the job done?
Yeah, mostly just when you need a removal spell like this, 3 mana is kind of the bar for you to need to clear. Terminate is seeing more play in Modern these days than ever before, because there are things that are big and large and need to die. So this is an effect that you can play. Surveil 2 is nice, but if it didn't have it, I wouldn't be, too sad, but I'm plenty happy to let it be here.
So the blue one, the Temporal Cleansing, for me, this card is a blue Assassin's Trophy, right? It looks bad, right? Because, putting things into the library doesn't sound as good, but it is just a clean 1-for-1. So let's just get that out of the way up top. How much is that effect going to be worth? Well, at 2 mana, they would never print a card like this at 2 mana. It's just too powerful. So with 3 mana is actually a fair rate for a card like that. Temporal Spring for a boomer like you, Lawson. But you can get this for much cheaper, right? You start on the Captive Weird or whatever else. I mean, the reason I mentioned Crabvine is because that deck gets all kinds of junkers into play, right? The Hedron Crabs don't participate in combat, neither does the Merfolk Secret Keeper. The Grave Crawlers often can't attack. The Narcomoebas don't really do that much. So plenty of ways to cast a Temporal Cleansing for mostly free, and this is a deck where we're struggling to find a catch-all card that can take out a Leyline, take out a Dauthi Voidwalker, take out a Sanctifier and Vec. This is the first card that we've seen that could actually do that effectively in Sultai colors while also hitting the other stuff that we need to hit. So it's going to be a good sideboard option specifically for a deck like that. But I'm curious if there's a wide world ahead of us. Like, what if this card is just good? Like, what if I have a Convoke deck using a lot of the new tools we get in this set, but this is just my go-to interactive spell? I mean, it's a great tempo play. It's a clean removal. It's 1-for-1.
I will say, I do think this card is absolutely phenomenal in Crabvine. Being able to remove problematic permanents from play, and specifically in that deck in particular, if your opponent puts it second from the top of their library, you play Merfolk Secret Keeper if you need that card not to get drawn, or you have a Rune Crab already in play. So you can just target your opponent those mill spells if you know that the scary thing is there. So I do think this is a perfect fit for that. I will say this card is much worse because it is a sorcery.
It is, yes.
Convoke spells being sorceries is always a little awkward, especially now that battles exist. It's nice to get to have blockers up and able to defend yourself in now these battles. So committing to, I need to deal with this thing right now, tapping out is a little scary. But of course, like, blue removal that can hit anything at pretty cheap, like, there's going to be some cost, that's kind of why we play this game. So I'm excited about this, though.
Yeah, one weird thought I had last night, and granted, I was very tired at the time, but I was like, we've never really seen a deck that rewards me for having 2 Electromancers in play, right? Like, 1 Electromancer is fine, but like, do we benefit from 2 Goblin Electromancers? And now with Convoke, you get 2 of these, and this thing's so free, baby. It's a free Terminate. Free Assassin's Trophy. All right, I won't go too far down that hole yet. We'll wait. And we'll move on. Getting down now into the 2 drops, I see an invasion here. Invasion of Mercadia. It's 1 and a red for a siege with 4 defense. When Invasion of Mercadia enters a battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw 2 cards. So it's a Tormenting Voice. The backside is a 3/3 creature, Chiron Flamewright. It has the activated ability 2 and a red, tap, discard a card to create 2 1/1 blue and red elemental creature tokens. And creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of the turn. Nice little callback there to the Spell Shaper mechanic from Mercadia. So something like this, Lawson, that has just like a basic effect at slightly below rate, but ever so slightly, and then the option to get this random creature later. What do you think about this?
This one I am very excited about. One, I think a lot of people have come to learn that the Red and 1 enchantment that we recently received that lets you discard a card and then give things haste, that card plays way better than it looks. And I think this card plays kind of similar to it. Of course, it has the exact same enter the battlefield effect, and the backside does give you an opportunity to also give creatures haste. So, there is a lot of similarities there. This card is just a little bit better on its backside for being grindy, but worse at doing something super explosive like, reanimating an Archon and then giving it haste and then attacking. This will be a little too clunky to do all of those things. But I am interested in playing this card specifically with the Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Being able to give your flipped Fable haste is something that is pretty exciting. So I could definitely see a world where these two play well together. Being another thing lets you kind of loot things into your graveyard, or lets you also play from both zones well.
So you're actually envisioning that we would activate the ability of the 3/3 Chiron Flame Rate on the backside.
In a perfect world, yes.
Okay. Yeah, so the comparison, Invasion of Mercadia versus Bitter Reunion, I think that's a good place to start, and it's a good reminder that the effect is more powerful than it may seem. Although I do think in all the scenarios you're describing, the Bitter Reunion still wins for specifically the haste interactions. But for getting a free 3/3, we can consider this. Next card up, Dusk Legion Duelist, 1 and a white vampire soldier. It's a 2/2 with vigilance. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on Dusk Legion Duelist, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So it does not specify how you're supposed to get these +1/+1 counters. Backup is a mechanic in set that can do it, but for Constructed, we're allowed to cast a wider net. Perhaps you want to do Luminarch Aspirant and get a free +1/+1 and a card draw every turn. It's a vampire, so maybe you're looking at Sorin Imperious Bloodlord, right? You play Sorin -2, get a big creature in play, but then after that you're +1ing, and that spits out +1/+1 counters, drawing a card every time. This one looks pretty good to me.
I also have only good things to say about this card. I do think it's an interesting point that it isn't a human, sadly, so it doesn't get to benefit from Thalia's Lieutenant, but it is a soldier. Luminarch Aspirant is also a soldier. There was also a creature from the Brothers' War that did a pretty similar effect that was also a soldier. So, there are a few cards in Magic's history and Modern that do benefit specifically the soldier creature type. So there is definitely, I think, some room to explore there. It also plays kind of well with the Graft land. There's a come into play tapped land that has Graft 1. So you could play this, immediately put the counter on it, and draw a card the turn it came into play, which I do think is a pretty cute interaction. Don't know if it's that good, but...
I see a Vigilance there, so now I'm like... Venerated Loxodon? Am I supposed to just convoke the +1/+1 counter onto this, or is that just too far? Vigilance is not the best keyword for this kind of creature.
I did just check, by the way. I had to do a quick little search. One of the creatures that I was thinking of was Sen's Tactician. It's a card from Morningtide. 1 white, 1/1, tap, put a +1/+1 counter on target soldier, and then each creature you control the +1/+1 counter on it can block an additional creature. Just kind of a cool thing that you could grab off of a Ranger Captain of Eos, which is also a soldier. So it lets you have kind of a 1-drop that is tutorable, efficient, quote unquote. So I don't know. I think there's definitely some room to explore around it. I've been for a while actually looking to try to find out a Field Marshal deck in Modern. I have not been able to find it yet, but much to explore.
Sen's Tactician, the 1-drop Kithkin Soldier.
That one, indeed.
Field Marshal, the 3-mana Soldier Lord. I do not recall what it does. Gives the Anthem effect.
So it's an anthem effect for soldiers and gives them first strike. So you get to be the king of the combat step. You just have to be willing to play Lords originally printed in Cold Snap. So do with that information what you will.
All right, moving on to Ozolith Shattered Spire, 1 and a green legendary artifact. If one or more +1/+1 counters would be placed on an artifact or creature you control, that many +1 are put on it instead. So that's a hardened scales effect, but this is on a 2-mana legendary artifact. Has an activated ability, 1 and a green, tap, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature or artifact you control, activate sorcery speed only. And for some reason it has cycling too. I have no idea why. Do we want more of this effect? Are we willing to pay 2 for it? Or is this just, too late to the party, we have enough of this, we'll play creatures if we want more of this effect?
Yes, we want more of this effect. No, this is not the one we want. It is a little sad that it is called the Ozolith Shattered Spire, but is not remotely close to what Ozolith is doing and costs twice as much. If you've ever played against the Hardened Scales deck, the moment an Ozolith comes into play, it feels like your opponent has made double the amount of counters because all of the things with modular are both moving their counters and counting it here. That interaction's crazy. The way this Ozolith works is instead of doubling your counters, you get 1 more, which is worse and costs twice as much. So I'm very not interested in this. This activation is super slow and clunky. There's, 1,000,001 things that could do this at more efficient cost.
Agreed. Lastly, among the 2-drops, we have Deeproot Wayfinder. 1 and a green, Merfolk Scout, a 2/3 creature. So not great stats, 2 mana, 2/3. Its ability says, whenever Deeproot Wayfinder deals combat damage to a player or battle, surveil 1, then you may return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So that is pretty attractive trigger, right? If you can ever pull this off, you're getting card advantage and ramp just for dealing some damage. On the other hand, it's a 2 mana, 2/3.
I'm going to say something, and this is going to scare you. But this card, to me, feels like Wrenn and 6.
What?
So much of modern interaction, when it comes to creatures, also targets planeswalkers. And I'm not saying this card will replace Wrenn and 6s from decks everywhere, but I do think that decks that do play Wrenn and 6 in it already might want to play 2 Deeproot Wayfinder outside of exactly creativity for obvious reasons. But I do think that this card has a much higher ceiling than Wrenn and 6, being a basically rampant growth every turn. Before we, even go down the route of exploring, Field of Ruining every single turn, or Ghost Quarter, or any of those kind of things. This card has to be dealt with immediately, or the game will just end. So I'm very, very excited about this card. It might be a Merfolk, but I don't think its home will be Merfolk decks mostly.
Okay, so you're not seeing the downsides. You're seeing a green Ragavan with huge upsides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something that I've been having to kind of explain to people from playing a lot of the Chancellor piles is if you have every creature in your deck be an automatic kill on sight, eventually your opponents don't have things to kill your creatures on sight. It's been a pretty typical play pattern of turn 1 Ragavan. Oh, that has to get bolted. Stoneforge Mystic. Oh, that has to get bolted. All right, play Fable. Oh, that Shaman token's got to die. And then they just run out, Eventually, they will not have it all. So having yet another thing that has to be dealt with immediately is something that I am interested in Modern generically. And the 2-drop slot specifically has been kind of hit or miss recently.
Okay, so David has his evaluation for Pioneer, where I thought this would have a more natural fit. It's harder to put lands in the graveyard there, so the trigger will not be as reliable, but the stats are better on Pioneer. I had not seriously considered it for Modern, but I like what you're saying. That makes total sense. Just make them have it again and again, and I think that's a good clue as to what kind of deck we should be looking to put the Deeproot Wayfinder in first. Don't build around it as your one big thing that's gonna carry you every game, but just add it to the team of must-kill creatures. All right, from there we move on to the 3 mana cards. We have some legendary team-ups. Oh boy. Lawson, tell us about Errant and Giada.
Sure. First of all, I don't know where Errant or Giada are from. Usually I know the lore. I think they're from Capenna, it looks like, just from their kind of artwork, but if I'm wrong, please don't yell at me in the comments. It's a blue and white for a blue, white, and 1 for a 2/3 flash flying human angel. You may look at the top card of your library anytime, and you may cast spells with flash or flying from the top of your library. This card, I do think, has some legs specifically in Pioneer. I think the only awkward part of this card is it looks like if you just were to read the text on it, that it would be the best card ever in a spirits deck.
Mm-hmm.
All of the spirits have flying. They all have, a lot of them have flash. Like, there's a lot going on here that I would be excited about. And then the creature type is human angel. And so that is a little awkward that your, pretty tribal focused deck has a realm walker in it that is not the tribe color or tribe type. It is the color, so it is a little bit easier to play, but really, really kind of clunky card, I think.
From what I've seen so far, Spirits players are not too excited. They feel like they already have Cemetery Illuminator if they want this effect. So I guess that's probably true. I mean, there's plenty of options there.
Mm-hmm.
Angels players are a little more excited. Angels so far has been mono white, usually splashing green for Collected Company, but if you had blue mana, you could also play Linvala, the 3 mana one from Zendikar. Errant and Giada also Collected Company eligible. So this could definitely replace the 2/1 flying cantrip card. I forget the name of it, Lawson, but you know, the one that terrorized Limited for a while.
Yeah.
So obvious homes there. If you're going to go into a format like Modern, we've lamented how Slitherwisp costs black, blue for a long time. It's like the one thing holding that card back is that you just can't do black, blue. Nevertheless, it's happened, right? Someone, I think, made top 8 of an RCQ a couple weeks back with a Slitherwisp deck, and you're just looking to play, your Flash Elementals, your Leyline Bindings, and just hope that Slitherwisp gets you some cards throughout the game. So Errant and Giada may be a better version of Slitherwisp, maybe not. Like, it doesn't stack quite as well, but it hurts your mana a lot less. I don't know.
It is legendary, so it does stack much worse. Yeah, I don't think I have any words for Errant and Giada for Modern. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't. I can't hold my breath that long. So, I would look at it for Pioneer or Commander and not a whole lot else. Sorry, Errant.
Next card up, Guardian of Girapur, another angel. 2 and a white angel, 3/3 flying. When Guardian of Girapur enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 other target creature or artifact you control. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So a slow blink, we would call that. I was very excited about this. I typed up all this little hype for it, and then I read it more closely and realized it doesn't have flash. And I felt very foolish. So it does not have flash. This is a charming prince that is a 3/3 flying angel. Is that good enough?
No. So I think yes, it doesn't have flash, which is awkward. Also, it doesn't flicker the battles, which it feels like it really should. So looking at this card, I'm like, it reminds me a lot of Flicker Wisp. But it doesn't, it can't target our opponent's things. It can't, there's a lot of things that it can't do. And the thing that we're getting instead of all of that flexibility is 2 more toughness, which is I would rather have 2 toughness than not have that toughness, of course. But, overall, it's just not something that this does not get me excited in any way,
What about the Angel type line? I mean, the Angels deck does rely on ETB triggers. They're not the cleanest of ETBs, they're not ETB draw a card, but they're ETB gain life, and then you turn the life into advantage with a Righteous Valkyrie or a Bishop of Wings. fits in the collected company curve. Okay, still not biting. What about I'm just playing a big value blink deck and I have Yorion Companion. Again, we're in Pioneer, and this sets up that endless Yorion loop, because the Yorion comes back on end step, and then this thing is hidden for the entire opponent's turn, and it comes back on their end step.
That is a little interesting. I will say, before you accidentally blow yourself out with this in a collected company deck, since this is only able to target your things, you can't really grab this at the end of turn off of collected company and get a cool flicker effect off, because then whatever you flicker won't be able to be around for your combat next turn.
Oh.
And if you're going to try to, get this value, you do actually have to walk into like Supreme Verdict and other Wrath effects, because you actually have to collect a company during your opponent's second main phase. And then after you resolve your collect company, your opponent gets priority again. So if you were going to try to do something tricky there, there's not a spot between second main phase and end step for you to do anything cool like that. So
that's a great catch. And as a otherworldly gaze Narcomoeba prize amalgam player, I would like to formally welcome the Angels players into the second main phase club. On your second main phase, we cast our signature spell. Otherworldly gaze for me, collected company for you. All right, I will not talk about blinking Kaalia Zenith Seeker. We need to move on. But you can do that. You can do it.
You can. Continue.
The next card up. The 10th member of the Sword Cycle. This one is blue and black. A Sword of Once and Future. Lawson, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I have been playing so many swords recently. I was so excited to see that we got the 10th, the final sword, pro blue, pro black. You cannot bounce my creature. You cannot terrorize him. What do we get for this value? And it is the most disappointing sword trigger ever. Oh
What?
My goodness. Okay, so 3 mana to play, 2 to equip, pro black, pro blue, +2/+2. Whenever you deal combat damage, you get a Surveil 2. Then you may cast an instant or sorcery with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana costs. Exile this spell. I mean, it's fine, but man, the decks that are playing swords don't usually play a ton of 1 and 2 mana things. So this is like the worst sword ever to go grab off of your Stoneforge Mystic. And then in addition to that, it can just miss. Like the general heuristic for hitting your opponent with a sword is, okay, we hit our opponent with a sword, and we always get 1 card value worth of effect from hitting our opponent. Fire and Ice literally draws you a card. Frontier and Forge exiles the top 2, and you can play those cards this turn. The black-white one picks up a creature. Like, they all in some way add to the board state, or they get you a card value immediately. Sword and Once and Future might do it for you once, but probably not in the future. It's just like it is so clunky. I am so disappointed in it, and yes, I've been holding that in all week.
Wow.
I'll be here all week.
So I'm hearing you say that if I'm excited about the free casting of an instant or sorcery that this Sword of Once and Future offers, that's not going to be any existing sword deck. There's no deck that currently wants a sword that actually meets that condition.
Correct.
And it's probably not worth building around, just based on...
Yeah, it's like... This is not the one, Chief.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because over time they've acknowledged that swords are not that powerful and they're actually fine for standard. So the last 2 swords are legal in Pioneer, but we haven't seen much from the red-green sword in Pioneer, and I imagine it'll be similar for the blue-black sword. Any interest in this next card here? Voldaren Thrillseeker. It's 2 and a red for a vampire warrior. 1/1 with backup 2. Backup means that when this creature enters, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. That can be itself if you want, but it's better to put it on something else. And if you put it on something else, that creature gains the following text until the end of the turn. And the following text is a special ability, pay 1 and sacrifice this creature to have it deal damage equal to its power to any target.
Yeah, I'm in. I'm super in for this card. I mean, backup 2, like, the floor on this card is a 3 mana 3/3 that you can pay 1 and sack it to deal 3 damage to target thing. So it's like, at the very worst, in a lot of ways, going to be a like 3-mana Blood Tithe Harvester. And in the best case scenarios, like, you can play this thing, and if your opponent did not leave blockers back for your one creature randomly, you'll get to put 2 counters on it, hit your opponent for 4 or 5 points of damage, and then sack that creature for 5 points of damage. Like, this card will just kill people who are not prepared for it. And I am very, very interested in trying to do that in multiple formats. So this is one that I'm kind of excited about.
Do you see like Splinter Twin combos with this and like a Yargle or something?
So I'm less interested in it for things like that. I think that it is more interesting as a cool card for Unearth and Imperial Recruiter. I think an interesting thing to keep in mind about all of the backup cards is that their power and toughness are low for what they actually are. Like, this card is at the very worst a 3/3, but because it only has 1 power, you can get it off of things that, care about power from your library, in the case of Imperial Recruiter. So this is something that I would be kind of interested in as kind of like a one-of tech thing that you can grab. These backup cards also play really well with Court of Calling, because they are enter the battlefield effects that can really, really mess with combat. We haven't seen a Court of Calling beatdown deck in Modern in a long, long time, basically since Birthing Pod was in the format. But this is the kind of effect that can actually like jump a strategy like that back into the format.
Yeah, it's a very versatile effect, versatile creature, and not obvious to me like what the deck would look like. And what I'm hearing you say is it's going to be something very new and very creative. That's exciting. All right, I'm going to skip down a little bit. Still in the 3 drops, we have Polukranos Reborn. Polukranos Reborn, green, 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 legendary creature Hydra. 4/5 reach. You can transform Polukranos by paying 6 and a Phyrexian white. So that's 6 and 2 life, or 6 plus a white. When you do that, you get a 6/6 reach lifelink Phyrexian Hydra called Polukranos Engine of Ruin. And the engine tips us off that we're getting a Wormcoil Engine style creature on the backside. So when Polukranos Engine of Ruin or another non-token Hydra you control dies, you get a 3/3 green and white Phyrexian Hydra token with reach, and a 3/3 green and white Phyrexian Hydra creature token with lifelink. So all of your Hydras become Wormcoil tokens at that point. Green, green, green. This is already signaling, okay, put it in Green Devotion, play Llanowar Elf. In some ways, like, that's the only deck that can really consider things like this. Unless I'm mistaken. What do you think, Lawson?
So this is a card that I am pretty excited about. The main reason to be excited about this card is it's a 3-mana 4/5. And that's a lot of text for a pretty cheap cost. And then the, flipping it over into Wormcoil Engine is incredibly powerful. And then I did want to bring this up because this is a kind of cute interaction. There are a lot of Hydras in Magic's history that are an X cost. So a good recent example is like Shivan Devastator. Red X for a 0/0 Dragon Hydra with flying haste and comes into play with X counters on it. If you flip over the Polukranos, you can just have X = 0 and pick up these 2 tokens for 1 mana. So if you're interested in cheesing people from, flipping your Poly K and then spending 2 mana to play, 2 of these Hydras from your hand, not pay any cost for them, make all these tokens, attack with my 6/6, like, I mean, there's a world there, and I just checked. There are 30 Hydras that are legal in the Pioneer format. Shivan Devastator, Mistcar Hydra are probably the best ones on 1 mana that are, like, technically cards you can play in the main deck and not be too sad about it. There's also a Hydroid Krasis that is, like, a playable card. So, I don't know. There's something there, I think.
You could collect a company to, like, find your Polukranos plus some 0/0s. Collect a company into a pair of 0/0 Hydras for value. So in terms of the normal use of the card, mono green plays OG Troll, the Old Growth Troll, and it's a pretty important card for them, mostly because it's very hard to get rid of those devotion pips. But it's also just hard to kill, right? Like, being at 3 mana puts it out of Fatal Push range. The 5th toughness on Pelucranos means you can't even use Obliterating Bolts, which a lot of red decks, or specifically the Gruul Vehicles deck, uses. So you can play Pelucranos probably as an additional copy of the Old Growth Troll, and just expect it to more or less live, and, you know, a Nykthos deck is very, very likely to get to the 6. It becomes pretty easy to flip this when you have nothing else going on, whereas Old Growth Troll just sort of sits there in the same situation. So it's an interesting card. I don't know if I would actually build around it, but not bad.
And kind of like we talked about earlier with the battles, like, if you care about winning battles, you need to have things on the board that interact well in combat, and 4/5 on attacking on turn 4, that's the best thing on the battlefield, I promise. Like, there's not a creature with a, you know, enter the battlefield effect that can even, you know, block the Polychronos and be excited, you know? So that's definitely something to kind of keep in mind.
All right, our next card is maybe my favorite one so far from the set. I freaking love this card, Lawson. It's the Chrome Host Seedshark, the Phyrexian Sharknado. 2 and a blue Phyrexian Shark, 2/4 flying. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, incubate X, where X is that spell's mana value. So we talked about incubate, and we gave reference to these cards that incubate for 2 or incubate for 3, but this is incubate X. So I have my Seedshark down, and I play any other spell. Treasure Cruise comes to mind, but it doesn't have to be Treasure Cruise. It checks the mana value of that card and gives me an incubator token with 8, in the Treasure Cruise examples, 8 +1/+1 counters on it. You can transform that into an actual creature at instant speed whenever you want sometime later. So we talked with Mord about, like, where do these incubator tokens rank on the game objects scale, and to me they're like slightly more exciting than clues. But on a card like Seedshark, they are way more exciting than clues. I'm extremely excited for this.
This is the card that I'm most excited about in the entire set.
Yes.
This one I am so excited to play. I know I have been on this podcast and already talked about this card called Shining Shoal. But cards with X in the mana cost are pretty exciting with this card. The other thing that I think is really cool about this kind of effect is this is randomly a, like, Monastery Mentor-esque effect that plays incredibly well with Wrath of God effects.
Yes.
Because the tokens aren't actually creatures when the wrath happens. I did brew around with this card a little bit in theory crafting with a card called Sun Scour. I don't know if you know of this card off the top of your head.
God.
It's the Cold Snap white double pitch spell. So it's in the same cycle as Avalanche Riders and Commandeer, but it's actual factual Wrath of God. But you have to pitch 2 white cards in addition to casting it, but it does cost 7. So in Magical Dreamland world, you can go turn 3 Teferi Time Raveler, bounce your opponent's creature, turn 4 Chromecast Seedshark plus the Teferi, and then when your opponent goes to interact and deal with your board, you can, at the end of your opponent's turn, Sun Scour, blow up the board, get a 7/7 incubated egg, and then on your turn, since they've got nothing in play, flip the egg and get to work. So very, very excited about this guy.
So Shining Shoal, Seedshark, we're gonna see it.
Oh yes, we're gonna see it a lot. Maybe not in the 5/0 deck dump, but definitely in the deck list gallery. So join the podcast so you can see terrible 4/1 and 3/2s.
I think this card is way, way better than most people think. You know, Shark Typhoon comes up a lot in conversation with this just because of the flavor callback, but Shark Typhoon, you know, that's like a late game play. This will just win the game on turn 4. What do I mean? I just play this on turn 4 and I cast a Murderous Cut and I've won the game. This is my thesis statements. Like, the game is over at that point. I have a 5/5 incubator token and I've just added a 2/4 and killed their biggest threat. How are they going to come back from that? This is just like the base use case of the card, right? You don't need to get the most outlandish thing you can think of, right? It doesn't have to be Treasure Cruise if you're thinking Treasure Cruise is too vulnerable. If you're thinking, I just want to do normal stuff, right? Maybe a Metallic Rebuke, right? A Metallic Rebuke defends the Seedshark and makes a 3/3 token, and these incubators can happily improvise future Metallic Rebukes. We've talked on this podcast about the third path Iconoclast and how those tokens being artifacts comes up a lot, right? We built a pretty slick deck with Galazeth Prismari. Seedshark fits right into that, and it's like better than third path, I think. Although they both do a great job of supporting the improvise/Galazeth shell. It works beautifully with Tezzeret, the Betrayer of Flesh. You play a Seedshark. It's not that easy to kill this on turn 3, so let's just assume it lived. I'm talking about Pioneer here again. Tezzeret comes down, you get a 4/4 incubator. The static text of Tezzeret allows you to immediately flip that into a 4/4 creature, and if you want, you can -2 the Tezzeret to turn that into an 8/8 shark, or Phyrexian Germ. This is just example plays, right? We haven't even gotten into my Convoke shell ideas yet. the Omen Hawker into the Seedshark into the Convoke Temporal, whatever that thing was. That's just Pioneer. I'm extremely encouraged to hear you looking at this in Modern, Lawson. Extremely encouraged.
Yeah, no, I think this card will be super, super sweet. I also, anytime I see a card like this, it does make me think about Time Warp nonsense for a second. This is just like a thing that you can play early game, and it really gives you a lot of reasons to get excited about playing, big clunky 4 and 5 mana cost instants and sorceries, and actually play specifically well with Time Warp. So
it is insanely good with Time Warp or any equivalent effect, right? Alrund's Epiphany is a card we use in Pioneer in that Galazeth deck, but if you're in Modern, the fact that the Chrome Host Seedshark just checks the actual mana value. So if you miracle, what is the miracle called?
Temporal Mastery.
Right. You're paying 2, you're getting an Incubate 7 off of that. In your extra turn, you can attack with the 7/7 if you want, or just go again with extra turn. I do not think that it's that big of a cost to flip these incubation spells. That's kind of the premise of like the baseline assumption of why I think this card is so good. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, so I think that it really just matters how big the thing is. Like, I'm willing to spend 2 mana to flip my 6/6 incubation thing, because 6/6 is huge, kind of thing. I'm way less excited about Chrome Host Seedshark if I'm playing it, and then I will cast my expressive iteration, my Thoughtseize, and my Lightning Bolt. Your turn. Like that's not what I want to do with this. I want to cheese people. I want to I want to play this card, and then the turn after it play like Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, draw a card, untap 2 lands, and now I can use those lands to activate it and make the 5/5. Like that is like a way more interesting thing to me than like playing this with efficient cards. Which, of course, I love playing cards that are clunky and awkward and can get me killed. So,
how much does the Delve extra turn spell cost? It costs 11, right?
It costs 11.
11 token that you get off the Seedshark. Super excited for this one. Super excited. All right, Lawson, I'm just looking ahead. I think we can finish the 3s. If we push on, we got a few more 3-drops, and that will leave David and I to just go through all the terrible, expensive 4-drops. I'm sure he's going to be so happy when I tell him. We've covered all the good stuff, and now he can try to sell me on the Kogla Titan Ape cards for the rest of the podcast. Moving on to the Halo Forager, a card that I thought was going to be one of the most exciting Modern cards, but a lot more has come out since then. Do you like Halo Forager for Modern?
No.
You don't like it?
No, it's okay. Isn't it just Snapcaster Mage but without Flash? And more expensive?
Well, that depends. So it's 1 blue, black, Fairy Rogue, 3/1, flying, no flash. When Halo Forager enters the battlefield, you may pay X, and when you do, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with mana value X from a graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell will be put into a graveyard, exile it instead. So it's different from Snapcaster because it works with Crashing Footfalls, it works with Ancestral Vision, it works with Cascade, where you'll be playing these cards. So it's like a plausible card to just fit a couple copies into an existing Rhinos deck, for example.
Yep. Yeah, no, I completely missed that. And also, it's not fair to me to make fun of this card for being just worse than Snapcaster Mage, because it does pitch to grief as well.
It does.
You know, and those are actual... Okay, yeah, I'm a little more excited about this card now. Okay, yeah, I'm in.
If you're actually going to spend mana on the spell you have to get back, it's a lot less exciting. So if the thing you're trying to rebuy costs 1 or 2, then it's just like a hugely expensive play, and it's worse than Arcane Proxy, which was a major disappointment. But I noticed like an interesting deck. The Brewer Deck Fate in 07 had put together like an as foretold Arcane Proxy deck with a bunch of stuff like Profane Tutors and Ancestral Visions and Footfalls. He might have even had the white one.
Restore Balance.
Something like that, yeah. And Arcane Proxy is terrible, right? But Halo Forger is just like a much better card for that exact shell. Like, there might be enough reasons now to like not just have to cascade every time, but to allow yourself an alternate way to cast those free spells. Also worth noting that Halo Forger can take cards from the opponent's library, so if you just need to cast their Unholy Heat, you're welcome to do so for 4.
Huh.
So it's a tricky little card, right? There's more to it than meets the eye, although Modern's a tough format to break into, so we'll see. All right. Do you think any of these next cards are good? The Invasion, the Ayara, should we just skip those?
I will talk about the Ayara for just a super quick second. I do think that this Ayara is actually kind of exciting, specifically in Modern, where you can sacrifice... because it doesn't say at sorcery speed, you can sacrifice the elementals, which is kind of sweet. So you could play like Ayara on turn 3, and then turn 4 you could play Fury, blow up some of your opponent's creatures, and then throw the Fury at them. They take 5, you gain 5. It blows up battles super easily, so I think there is something to this card. I'm not super interested in paying 3 to play it, and then 5 to flip it, and some life to get the backside. I think that all of these things that want you to flip it to get the cool effect is like a little sketchy, but I do think the front side of this card is got something.
Ayara, Widow of the Realm, 1 black, legendary creature, elf noble, 3/3. Tap, sacrifice another creature or artifact. Ayara, Widow of the Realm, deals X damage to target opponent or battle, and you gain X life, where X is the sacrifice permanent's mana value. You can transform Ayara for 5 and a red Phyrexian, activate at sorcery speed only. Then it becomes Ayara Furnace Queen, the Phyrexian elf noble, 4/4 creature at the beginning of combat. On your turn, return up to 1 target artifact or creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step.
Look at you being a good podcast host and reading the cards and not assuming it's a visual media. Look at that.
Yeah, I did not actually click that you could do this with a temporary creature like an Evoke Elemental. I mean, the ability is not terrible. It's just that... I'm talking about like a more normal deck now. For a regular deck, the ability is not terrible, but this is a 3-mana creature without an ETB. So you kind of have to... You have to boost these. You have to put Tyvar into the deck to like make this effect a little more attractive.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to get paid off with making the X damage actually convert to something more tangible than just damage to them. So flipping battles makes a lot of sense. Maybe something there, but it's an uphill battle for Ayara, I think. Tribute to the World Tree. Green, enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card if its power is 3 or greater. Otherwise, if its power is not 3 or greater, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it.
I think this card is bad. I think it's bad, though, for kind of an awkward reason, and I think that reason is just that this is, like, to me, it looks like it wants to go into exactly a deck that is playing cards similar that play well with, like, the Great Henge, and cards like Tribute to the World Tree, awkwardly, I don't think give you enough of a reward for you to not be on board early game to get this thing in. So I think that it just doesn't find a home on the mana curve. I don't think you could have this thing cost 2 mana. I don't think that you can really add any more text to this card. I just think that kind of the way that effects like this have worked in Magic's history are theoretically they seem powerful, but finding a world where you can be grindy but not be adding to the board state at this point is kind of not where Magic is.
So I'm reading David's notes on the card. He's thinking mainly about Pioneer. He's saying that the draw a card text is a complete distraction, and what's really broken about Tribute to the World Tree is what he calls the Lord effect, right? Putting 2 +1/+1 counters on all of your small creatures. Lines he's envisioning. Elf into Tribute, that's your first 2 turns. Now you're ready to play like a Hangerback Walker for 1, but it comes in with 3 counters because you get this bonus +2 counters. Sadly, you can't play the Hangerback on 0. That will not trigger it.
Oh.
Or just like Elf on turn 1, Tribute on turn 2. Next, you play Animation Module followed by a second Elf. The Elf comes in with 2 +1/+1 counters that triggers the Animation Module. Multiple times, you can make some tokens and they will also get counters. The plants from Nissa become very, very big. This is again the 3-mana Nissa that makes plants that is somehow the key to all of David's like off-the-wall brews, although the card has not proven itself yet. I mean, it's very cool. Like, I want to like this. 3 mana's tough. Green is super tough.
Yeah, and that's just kind of the awkward thing is like there are worlds that I could see you do some kind of interesting things with the counters side, but that is not a mono green devotion deck. So if we're having to jump through the hoops to have a green enchantment, I do think we want Nykthos, but not every deck can be a Nykthos deck. News at 11.
For me, it's like the draw card is so enticing. We've spent so much time playing bad Kiora decks, and Kiora triggers on 4 power. There's a big break between 3 and 4, and what I found just like searching for 3 power creatures versus 4 power creatures. So I am wondering if there's something that unlocks with like this 3-mana version of the Kiora effect. Maybe that's the trap that David's warning me against. I'm not sure. Like Wild in the Kettle, drawing a card is not going to save my deck. We'll see.
Kiora also does something. This card doesn't do anything. Otherwise,
Ouch. All right. And our final card for this installment. A team up, Baral and Kari Zev. This is a card that I've read like 5 or 6 times, and every time I was like, maybe there's something here. No, it's terrible. And on my 6th try, I think I finally figured out something to do with it. It's 1 blue-red, legendary creature, human. 2/4, first strike, menace. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, you may cast a spell with lesser mana value that shares a card type with it from your hand without paying its mana cost. If you don't do that, create First Mate Ragavan, a legendary 2/1 red monkey pirate creature token. The Ragavan gains haste until end of turn. So my confusion, and let me just state this clearly because I think a lot of people misread this card. The free casting of the spell has to match the card type of the spell you cast. So if you played an instant, you have to play an instant from your hand. If you played a sorcery, it can only cast a sorcery. The free card has to come from your hand. So it's not actually card advantage, it's just like a tempo play.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that together kind of makes me think that part of the card just doesn't do anything. Like that's a complete trap. The other part that I misread for the first 5 times was that this Ragavan is a permanent Ragavan. And I did not really click on that. So I thought it was a temporary Ragavan, like the original Kari Zev. But no, this Ragavan, First Mate Ragavan, he's in it for the long haul. He's going to stay as long as you want, and then he's going to come back whenever he dies. And that may be the best use of the card when all is said and done. It's just 2 bodies, one of which keeps coming back.
Yeah, I do think that is most likely going to be the most efficient thing you can do with this. It is also kind of cute the way that this card plays specifically with Ancestral Visions. Lets you, get to play that card again from your hand for, very cheap. It is a little awkward that a lot of the ways to basically play a free spell on turn 3, basically as you play Baral and Kari Zev, are not sorceries. You can't like Baral and Kari Zev and then gut shot your opponent's creature and then, okay, cool, now I'll play my, Ancestral Visions. Gut shot, since it's an instant, it can only play instants. So it won't actually work out that well for you. You can play Noxious Revival if you really want to Phyrexian sorcery, but other than that, you will just kind of have to wait. So
I think that's an instant too, actually.
Oh my god, there's just nothing. Okay, well,
there's nothing.
I'll come back. So I do think that this card is not super good for cheating stuff in. It is kind of cute that you can get Dies triggers because the Ragavans are legendary. So if you cast multiple spells in one turn, you can make a Ragavan and then make a Ragavan and then make a Ragavan and then make a Ragavan. And now your opponents have taken 3 damage from your Blood Artist. But I don't know what deck is playing Kari Zev and Instance and Blood Artist and all of that. So
you can only do that once a turn, sadly, because this only triggers once a turn. So it's a very restricted card. Like, every path you think you're going to go down, it's like, oh, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. Just make the monkey. That's it. Make the monkey and have 4 or 5 with some stats split across 2 bodies. Mm-hmm. And if that's good enough for you, then you'll be happy with Baral and Kari Zev. If not, you will not be happy with this. So perhaps more of a cautionary tale than anything else, but it's an interesting set of stats on kind of a weird is-it attacking creature.
Yeah.
All right, Lawson. So those are the 3 drops that stood out to me. Am I missing anything?
The only 3 drop that I would bring up that we kind of skipped over was specifically a white invasion of Dominaria. White and 2, battle siege, enters the battlefield, you gain 4 life and draw a card, and then the backside is just a straight up Sarah Angel. I think that this is kind of the like as grindy of a siege as you could find for a control deck. And it plays well specifically with bolt, snap, bolt kind of things. So you could play Invasion of Dominaria on turn 3, and then turn 4, you could bolt your opponent's blocker, Snapcaster Mage, bolt the invasion, and then go to combat and attack the invasion. So if that means anything in the world to you, then that's kind of exciting, but...
So you would have to commit 3 mana and sorcery speed for this gain 4 draw card. I don't know. I mean, that's not that much worse than just playing Teferi Time Reveler. Mm-hmm. If I'm in a control shell, I guess there's often opportunities to like get 1 hit in with the Hollow Storm Giants, but it's like not worth it to do so. And maybe this changes the equation. Like you can actually unlock the Sarah Faithkeeper when you do that. I don't know.
Yeah, and it gets better if you're willing to, play cards like Faladar Guardian, or if you're willing to play things like Flicker Wisp. I think that is, moving down a slightly different route than a pure control deck, but this is one of the few battle cards that lets you kind of go a little bit more into the late game. So, I don't know. Something to kind of look at.
So if there's like a slow, in Pioneer, for example, a slow Yorion battle deck where you're just trying to loop battles with Yorion, this would help get you there. Right? Maybe you play this, maybe you play the 4 mana one that double rampant growths. Maybe you play just a selection of 2 mana ones for defense.
Yeah. Something there. I don't know how much, though.
All right. We've made it through the 3 mana cards previewed so far. This set is extremely dense. It's extremely rich. I'm super excited for it. Lawson, thanks so much for coming on and helping us think through some of these cards.
Absolutely. I'm super, super excited for this. It in many ways feels like one of the more complicated standard level sets that has come out in quite a while. I think the cards that are most exciting to kind of brew around are the Seedshark, the Invasion of Kaldheim that y'all will talk about next time, and then Evasion of Ikoria. I think you guys are like kind of sleeping on the fact that yes, the just grabbing Hex Mage and having this thing come into play is nuts. But I will prove that, and I will post many bingo-esque snapshots in the Discord. So don't worry, it'll be there.
The 4 mana 8/8s. You're gonna go for it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. There's a lot to look forward to. I can't wait. So we will be back later this week to finish up the set review. David will be back on the show, hopefully, and we will talk about these expensive cards. We haven't even gotten to half of the legendary team-ups. So we'll get to all that and anything else that gets previewed in the next couple of days. But thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. This concludes part 2 of our Brewer's Guide to March of the Machine. Tune in next time for the final installment and our top picks for Modern and Pioneer. If you enjoyed this podcast, please let us know. Leave us a review in your podcast app and visit patreon.com/faithlessbrewing to join our Discord community and help support the show. That's all for today. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.